our first webinar, but our first webinar of 2025. And we're super excited to have everyone here. We'll probably wait 1 minute and give people a chance to get kind of ready to go. And then we're going to jump right in. But I'll quickly start off maybe with a little bit of an introduction. So, hi guys, I'm Sharif Virani, and I'm happy to be your host for this webinar. I'm also the head of partnerships at Ecom North. And for those of you that don't know, Ecom North is Canada's largest dedicated D2C and e-commerce community. We're about 1 year down our journey into that into building that community, and we're very excited to be working with partners like Airwallex as well as Trung to bring you guys a combination of real stories, real experiences, and real numbers when it comes to building your brands in Canada and the rest of North America. So today you've kind of taken that first step. It's joining together to share these insights that really helps facilitate the growth of your brand. And our hope today is that you leave this webinar feeling seen, heard, and empowered on your journey to expand your brand beyond our own borders or beyond your own borders. A special thank you today goes out to the team at Airwallex for helping put this together and treating us all to lunch at a later date provided by Uber Eats. Airwallex provides really powerful financial solutions for global businesses, offering efficient currency management, seamless international transfers, and streamlined financial operational tools for running your business, whether it be just e-commerce or even beyond that into other areas like tech in general. And we'll speak a little bit more about Airwallex as well later on today. So maybe we'll start off today with a couple quick little questions. And so I wanted to show quickly, you could either raise your hand or put it in the chat, who's participated in a piece of programming by Ecom North before. And that could be either something online or that could have been something offline. So maybe you subscribe to our newsletter, you've heard our podcast, or you've come to one of our events or summit. It would be just interesting to see a quick little show of hands, or just put it in the chat if you've come to something at Ecom North, and you can just say yes or no. And then I'm also curious to know as well. Okay, I'll give you guys a little time to answer as well. What's up? What's up, group? Oh, great. That's a shout out. Okay. Summit, seeing lots of Summit. Very excited to see that. Who is joining us from Canada today? Let's throw that in the chat. I see a Vancouver. Okay, perfect. I see some other people here from Canada. Montreal, Chile TO. Okay, great stuff. Okay, lots of Toronto. That's good. So we're all in Ontario as well. And who's currently doing business only in Canada? And we'll use this to tailor our discussion a little bit today, guys. Perfect. That's great. And okay, so now we got a little bit of insight and we'll tailor today's discussion. And that actually brings us to our honored guest, Trung. Welcome. Would love to, if you could give us a little introduction on yourself and talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and what inspired you to start RYSE.
Thanks for having me. So I started RYSE, man, it's been a long time. The first concept of our technology was conceived back in 2015, actually, and the first gen was launched in 2018. What we essentially do is we create these little smart home devices to motorize and automate your window blinds and shades. The idea was that we didn't want to replace our existing shades or blinds, so we wanted to create a retrofit solution, and was really surprised that there was no available solutions in the market. You can see by the background image here, that's what the device looks like. This is our second generation that we launched back in 2021, I believe. So we did a whole rebrand, learned a lot from Gen 1, and then launched Gen 2. And the concept was very simple when we first initially conceived it. It was essentially a motorized pulley system. That's how I thought about it. That's how I thought a product like this existed. Turns out it didn't. And that's really where we launched and entered the smart home space, specifically in this category, where we didn't see an existing player servicing window coverings and automating existing window blinds. You had players out there that would sell you replacements. So, you could go even to IKEA and buy a fully functional motorized shades, but they have size limitations and design limitations. We only wanted to work on retrofits. So anything that's currently manually controlled. So since then, this was the first product and first type of product to motorize any beaded chain or cord loop. We since launched a product for curtains that sits on a rod or track and moves the curtain side to side. And we're expecting to ship the first batch of our new product for blinds that tilt using a wand. And that should be out by the end of this year. So the thesis for the company and the real focus for us is on this category of smart window blinds, shades, and curtains, smart window coverings in general, and on a retrofit basis.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think I love that story because it really showcases like true innovation, right? You've built a better mousetrap. And when we talk about innovation, there's different ways to set up your company when you do that. And some ways are a little bit more strategic than others. I know you guys have a very interesting arrangement when you've done that, that allows you to do a little bit of labor arbitrage by doing R&D in Canada and then, doing a little bit of sales in the US. Can you speak to a little bit about that and how you've set that up?
Yeah, so we primarily only sell in the US. We do have distribution in Canada. We're even in Best Buy stores across Canada. But the Canadian dollar is really weak. So it's very expensive when you convert it to USD to CAD, and we pay everything in USD to our factories to try to maintain equal margins. So as the Canadian dollar weakens, it just gets more expensive for Canadians, unfortunately. I believe over 90% of our sales is in the US. So the idea there is that because 90% of the sales is in the US, you're generating USD. When you convert to Canadian, you're generating a lot more Canadian dollars, and you're paying team members in Canada. Cost of living is much more affordable over here. So you're definitely not paying the Silicon Valley or New York City type of salaries in Canada, which is the benefit for us. At the same time, you get the benefit from the Canadian like shred credits and whatnot for R&D. So that's how we kind of structure it and generate sales. And I'm sure there's a lot of e-commerce companies that do the same thing, where if they're selling on Amazon or Shopify in the US, they're benefiting from the same type of factors.
So that's great. So it seems like building in Canada actually saves you money, which is a little
Significantly.
bit, yeah, it's kind of controversial, like compared to what people were saying last year. It's like, oh, why are you building in Canada? Now it's like, wow, there's some real savings that can be accounted for when you
Um,
build in Canada.
Well, let's use a old industry like the auto industry. There's a
Yeah.
reason why Chrysler, GM, Ford, they all have factories in Canada. They're doing the same thing. So they're building in Canada, then they're shipping it to the US, and
Mhm.
they're benefiting from that exchange rate.
What if you were to ballpark the percentage of savings on R&D there by doing that? Could you, like, for someone that doesn't know, they have no idea, they've heard about this now, and they're wondering, is this worth attempting? Is it like, are we talking 25%? Are we talking 50%? What's kind of the numbers?
50%. Like you're gonna pay an
Wow.
engineer in Silicon Valley like
Wow.
150 a year USD.
Wow.
So what's
That's
the point, right?
that's a game changer. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's that's the difference between bootstrapping or raising, actually.
Yeah.
Um, Interesting. Okay. And talk a little bit more about some of the tactical decisions that you've put into place when establishing that US entity. So, what are kind of some of the steps you took there?
So right off the bat, I think a lot of Canadians aren't aware, but it's a lot more beneficial to incorporate in the US as a US Delaware C Corp, or if you're hopping on the trends in Texas or whatnot, Nevada. But opening US Delaware C Corp costs a couple of bucks. You can use Stripe Atlas. They handle the whole process for you. They get you a bank account with either SVB or Mercury. Everything's very seamless. You get an EIN number, which is similar to a business number in Canada. And with that, you could open, again, bank accounts. Um, the reason why a US Delaware C Corp or US corporation is very important is there's a lot of, first and foremost, a lot of VCs or investors, if you want to take them on, they the big players only invest in Delaware C Corps. They have a mandate to only invest in US companies,
Mhm.
just for tax reasons and legal and whatnot. Um, so that's first and foremost. Secondly, if you are a CPG company or any company holding inventory, there is a lot more lending and inventory financing options that are only available to US companies. So that's another reason.
Okay.
So you can always use the US entity to finance your inventory and operations going forward. For example, there's a company called Kick Further that we've used many times, and it's kind of like a co-op. You list up a campaign and people fund it. It's pretty cool, but again, only available for US corporations. Um, so there's a lot more financing and funding opportunities as a US company. And it doesn't matter. It could be the US company could be the parent and the Canadian could be the sub or vice versa. But if you do want to raise equity in the future, it's a lot more beneficial if the US is the parent.
Okay.
Namely because you're going to be issuing equity and you're going to attract more VCs that can invest in US corps.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, that's how we structure ours. The Canadian is actually the parent and the US is a sub, but we generate all the revenue in the US sub. We build that traction. It goes through the US banks. We're able to tap into inventory financing. And then the funds are repatriated back to Canada for covering operation costs and whatnot.
Interesting. So I think that's some real tactical advice for people there, I think, is setting up the Delaware Corp for money management, investment, sales, setting up the R&D in Canada for access to those tax grants. Also, a bit of a better quality of life for your team as well. Happier
Mm-hmm.
employee, happier company. Um, what are some of the mistakes that you guys kind of made when there, or did you get it right the first time?
No. We started the US entity a little later on
Okay.
because we talked to a lot of lenders and a lot of investors, and they said the same thing. They're like, "Oh, we only invest in Delaware C corp, so we only invest in US corp." So I'm like, "Okay, we'll just open a US corp and then open a US bank account and then plug in the Shopify." I think another reason was back then Shopify's rates were a lot more affordable. Like you would save 1 or 2% just being a US using US Shopify's platform, rather than you using
Hmm.
Shopify Canada, which would then convert to Canadian dollars. So you would actually save a lot more money just by the platform fees and then the foreign exchange fees.
Okay, that's
So
interesting.
that
And
was
so
that
maybe,
was another reason why we did. And now that I think about it, that we did open a U.S. corporation. If you compare some of these products and the fees, many times they would charge Canadians a lot more in credit card processing or monthly subscriptions or anything like that.
okay. Interesting. And maybe talking about that currency, this is a good segue into currency arbitrage. So quick question for the audience, if you don't mind putting in the chat, who is managing multiple entities across border right now? Who does have, a US entity, a Delaware C Corp? Would be interesting to know. And then what are you guys currently using to manage those finances? And Trung, I know you have a lot of experience doing that. So how do you guys currently do your financial management and your business operations? Are there any financial tools, open banking tools that you use to make that experience a little bit more seamless? Oh, sorry, Trung, did you hear me there?
Oh, it's for me. I thought you were asking the
Oh,
audience.
sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, that second
No.
second part was for you. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
So I'll
Yeah, I'll tell you over the last I'm always like one of our kind of uh traits in our company is always experiment and always be experimenting, always be testing. And I'm always looking at new software to be testing. Um I've tested all the banking apps in Canada and in the US, and Canada like by far lags behind the US.
mhm.
Um SVB was the first bank we opened because of the Stripe Alice program, and then Mercury and Brex launched, and Brex was just so seamless. Brex was probably my favorite banking app, and then prior to Airwallex, and I found out that Airwallex powers Brex, which is pretty cool. Mercury's great as well, and then I always wondered why Canada didn't have any good banking apps. To be honest, I've used all of them. I've used Float, I've used Loop, I've used Keep, I've used all the banking or kind of credit card apps, and they just pale in comparison to the US platforms. Um, just the UX, UI, the flow, the speed, how money moves, things like that. And then I found Airwallex, and Airwallex was the one that's I'm really just using 100% of the time. They have all the bells and whistles and tools that I need for managing my currency, um, expense accounts, employee credit cards, payments to apps and software providers and everything. So definitely interesting to see that nothing was available in Canada prior to Airwallex, obviously, but it's night and day. Like there's even though you have some of these fintech companies in Canada raising a lot of money and building out their apps, it still pales in comparison to Brex. Once you test Brex and compare it to what's available in Canada, there's nothing.
And as a business owner, what does that mean to you? Like, how important is having instant currency transfers for your international operations? What's the difference there? I use Float. I'm intimately familiar with the delays there. It
So
can handcuff you.
so I never use Canadian credit cards because other than one or two like specific credit cards, like Scotiabank has one, and that's another one I use. But other than if you use a Canadian credit card on a US transaction, there's another 2.5% fee, transaction fee on top of the conversion, which may not be the most favorable conversion. So
Hmm.
you're losing 5 points right off the bat, like using Canadian credit cards. So you have to use a US credit card. With float, you have to pre-fund the credit card, and if the credit card runs out of space of funds that you pre-fund, it takes some up to 5 business days to pre-fund. So I have suppliers and people just trying to charge their card and it's just bouncing. So that time is just annoying for me, and there's no way for them to speed it up. Versus if I use something like Airwallex or a US banking app that's connected to my bank and they can just pull funds right away. It's seamless, it's instant. So
Hmm.
we actually migrated all our banking to Airwallex, both our US entity as well as our Canadian entity. And like I know you guys are sponsoring this, but I'm not just saying that. Like I've used all the apps, I've used all the fintech companies, I've used them all, and there's only two I would keep. Is one is Brex and one is Airwallex. That's it. The rest are, no offense, garbage.
I experienced that the other day. I was
Yeah,
traveling for work, and I won't name the company, but it was one of the ones that you mentioned. And I was at the car rental office. I went to rent a car, hit my limit, and now it's like I got to wait 3 days to rent this car, but I need it now. So
yeah.
I totally familiarized with that. I think the access to money is is critical, and it's something that we need to work on here in Canada.
Hmm.
And I love that you just gave people right there 55% savings on their business there, like that R&D trick, the conversion trick. Like there are some real tactical strategies that people can implement. Um, I'd like to know in the chat who else has been experiencing some challenges with currency management or international transactions. Let me get to know as well. So let's throw that in the chat and maybe we'll ask some questions about that down the line. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, expanding beyond your own borders and what that looks like on the marketing and growth side. I know you guys have done some really interesting work with TikTok and TikTok Shop, live shopping. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you've approached that in the US? Because it's not necessarily a program that's open to people in Canada unless they do certain things. And I think I'd love to hear from you what those certain things are.
So I attended a ecom mastermind event. It was like very exclusive, 10, 20 companies. And there's a lot of US companies that came up, and TikTok Shop is a new way of shopping. I think of it as like Amazon meets QVC kind of thing. Like it's very interactive.
Mhm.
There's TikTok Shop and there's TikTok Live. Um, it's good for sub $100 products. Um, Anything over might be risky. But that being said, it's a new way to experiment, explore, and discover new products for the American consumer. TikTok Shop is only available in the US. The UK and Europe just opened. I think 6 other regions in Europe, like France, Italy, Spain, I believe. But if you have a TikTok UK account that was open a couple months ago, then you have access to the other countries as long as you have distribution there. So we actually opened a UK corporation as well as our existing US corporation, and from that we're able to open a TikTok Shop account. The trick is with TikTok Shop, you have to be physically in the UK or the US at the time, and you need someone in addition to the corporation to open it on your behalf. So we have family and friends in the States or investors that could open the account for us, because not only do they need the US corporation's information, they also need your personal information, and they're very strict. Um, Opening a TikTok account is annoying. It's more annoying than opening an Amazon account. Like they'll flag you for a bunch of stuff. You have to upload specific documents and only that one document as a image file, and their algorithm scans it and they'll flag it if it doesn't kind of look like what they have on file and whatnot. So it's very tricky to open, but once you have it, it's I'm not gonna say it's like the wild wild west, but it's if you think about how when Google Ads first started or when Facebook just launched with their ad programs, it's like that right now. So there's
Mhm.
huge opportunity where costs are very low and huge opportunity to generate revenue and tap into a new audience. But you have to be a U.S. Corporation. You have to have a U.S. resource to open it for you in the U.S. And then same thing with the U.K.
Okay, interesting. So it's not like the old days of drop shipping where you could just kind of go everywhere. You
No.
need to, it is useful having potentially a boots on the ground in that country that you're going to be operating. So you can take advantage of some of those systems.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
You definitely need a U.S. Corporation, like a U.S. address. Even though when you open the U.S. corporation, you get a Delaware address as an agent address. They need to see a physical address, so you could just open a co-working space address for mail and
Okay.
whatnot and use that. But they'll flag you on that. So uh, I would say TikTok Shop is extremely attractive channels. Like I've seen some of these companies where they're just selling underwear or like Yeti knockoffs, and they're generating $50 million a year in revenue. Like
Wow.
it's all the primarily through TikTok. and TikTok Shop. They're
Wow.
just posting every day, and they're building an affiliate army. So it's a different way to market, and it doesn't rely on ad spend. TikTok
Okay.
Shop, it relies on you building relationships with influencers and affiliates that market the
Mm.
product on TikTok for you, and they just get a commission. So it's actually better for you because you don't pay upfront. Like, I'm not going to pay a guy $5,000 to post on Instagram. I'm going to give him a commission for every dollar he generates for me. So it's win-win.
And when you work with those influencers, do you give them ideas on how to integrate into their content, or they take it from there?
They take it from there because the more they
Wow.
post, the more money they make, right? They have
Mhm.
to figure it out themselves. You never know when a video is going to go viral, and you post it, and then they, you know, they could either iterate, test, and post more. They could use B-roll. They could get samples and do it themselves. But there's ways to motivate them, and there's a lot of case studies on YouTube. You guys could YouTube and whatnot. But it is an interesting new channel and a better way to attract people and influencers to market for you rather than paying them a flat fee.
Interesting. So it's kind of like UGC 2.0, because I know the whole comment now is like,
Yeah,
oh, UGC is
it
not
is. It is.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's not just sending a sample to an influencer for free for them to post and using their assets. They're if they're motivated, they're constantly going to be posting your
Okay.
products in a
Yeah.
different way because they're earning a commission. So if they see one video that they posted earning them a couple $100, they might post it a week later. So
Hmm.
so you're constantly getting new creatives, new content on TikTok that will show to hopefully a new audience and a new potential customer and convert for you.
So I'd be remiss, because I just talked about real numbers, real experiences, etc. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, approximately what you think your sales split is there on TikTok right now, if you were to look at like Instagram, Facebook, etc.
So it's still Meta and it's still Instagram, Facebook are the top ones. Google will follow. Amazon and Shopify are 50-50. TikTok's still a new channel for us,
Hmm.
but we recognize it's a very, very important channel.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you talked about Europe a little bit. How do
Yeah.
you deal with the VAT and all that kind of, financial navigation there?
So we used a third-party VAT service. I think it's called Simply VAT. Yeah, Simply VAT.
Okay.
It's a very annoying process. It probably take you four to 6 months, and Amazon, if you plan to expand to Europe, Amazon won't let you store inventory in their warehouses until you get a VAT number, even though
Okay.
they say they will. You need a VAT number. There is a program called the Pan EU program. If you just Google it, you'll see it. That's where Amazon has, I believe, 8 warehouses, and if you have a physical location, you need a VAT there. It's kind of like what do they call it in the States? It's kind of like when you have to start charging taxes in the States because you have a warehouse there, a location.
Hmm.
So we apply for, I believe, eight or nine countries in Europe just because they have the warehouses. But those 8 or 9 countries can then ship out to all the other like main regions within Europe. And I think we started that process in October. So we're just like we got 4 of the VAT numbers right now. We're waiting for the rest, and we have inventory waiting to be sent to Europe, and we're going to be posting it up on Amazon. So that's just another kind of new market strategy.
Hmm. I mean, I know home automation is pretty big in Europe, right? Because their renovations, like property's old there, it's aging. They're trying to innovate, they're trying to update things. What were some of the decisions that you guys made? Like, okay, it's time to enter Europe. We've done Canada, we've done the US. Now we've seen some signals in Europe. Let's go dip our toes in the pond.
We looked at so with our product specifically, we own the IP, and we knew that there was going to be hundreds of knockoffs of our products, and
Yeah.
there were hundreds of knockoffs, looking the same, looking a little different. But because we have our IP, our patents, we filed on Amazon,
Hmm.
which is now called the Apex program, but the Amazon Patent Neutrality program, where Amazon is basically the judge, jury, and executioner. And we won a court judgment, which allows us to remove any knockoffs on Amazon. And we waited for our UK and European patents to be issued before we went into Europe, because
Okay.
there's hundreds of them. But prior to that, prior to us kicking us off the knockoffs in Europe, we saw the traction that the Europeans, the knockoffs had in Europe before we
Wow.
decided to enter. So we saw that, okay, well, this seller's selling 1,000 units, this seller's selling X number of units. It's a good time to enter Europe. We have our patents. We could kick them off. Nobody could buy the similar product. If they wanted to buy a product like ours, they have to buy it from us because of our IP. So that was so wait for Europe was actually a timing issue until our patents were issued before we entered, because only
Hmm.
then would we be able to compete. You're not going to be able to compete with a factory in China that makes the product and sells it for 10% more. You
Hmm.
have to build the you have to build a market, especially as a new product like ours. So we did have to wait for patent protection and our patents being issued.
I think that's a genius tactic, man. I love that you guys looked at, you looked at the rise of knockoffs as an indicator that there's a good market there. Okay, let's go
Yeah,
get the patents and do that.
yeah,
That's something that I don't think a lot of people think about. I think a lot of
yeah,
people would be deterred by that. But
yeah.
hats off to you guys for that.
I think
The
if you guys have unique technology, if it's hardware or anything unique, you definitely need to get some IP.
mhm.
Yeah,
Look, it comes
otherwise
down
you're
to
just competing on price.
you got to have a good product. You got to have a good
Yeah.
product. You got to have a good brand, right? And a
Hmm.
good community behind it. So I'd love to know in the chat who has experimented with live shopping and who's been experimenting with influencer marketing in new regions. And maybe we'll dive into the next topic over here. So we'll start chatting a little bit about retail versus online. If you were to say your mix right now, retail versus online, how does that kind of look?
For myself or the group
Oh,
chat?
sorry, for yourself.
So we're trying to penetrate a lot of the physical retail in the US right now, specifically
Okay.
retailers that sell window blinds. There's a lot of large franchises that do that. So we're quite far with a few of them. In Canada, we are in Best Buy.
Hmm.
Um, and we're doing a pilot right now, a test online with Home Depot in the US before a potential US rollout. But for our type of product, Home Depot and Best Buy would be the best because they have a huge focus on the smart home. Um, Retail is it's more like a billboard than it is a huge revenue driver for us. I know many other smart home companies is the total opposite. But we've definitely had more success with a direct to consumer.
Okay, interesting. And so I did a little bit of research. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys were in Best Buy and Linen Chest, correct, in the US?
Best Buy in Canada and Linen Chest in Canada.
Oh, sorry, in Canada, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's those partnerships is it $10 million or so in sales. Is that a correct number?
No, no, it's far
Mhm.
less. We'll
Mhm.
we'll likely break 10 million this year.
Okay.
And we have a few other brands. Um, but I don't know what the split in retail would be. The
Okay.
majority of it will still be online, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay. So
wouldn't
you're
rush
lever.
into retail. Yeah,
Okay.
unless you're like CPG where you're selling like drinks,
Hmm.
um, candy, snacks, stuff like that. Retail is not something I would recommend right off the bat, but that's just my recommendation.
So
Could be
treat
different for anybody.
retail like a billboard. Once you have your D2C funnel and everything running correctly, you can use that as a billboard, kind of like a showroom.
Yeah, if people want to come see, feel, touch, buy it right away, then they could go to retail. But the retailers are always going to ask how you're going to support their channel. And if
Okay.
you're only driving traffic to your website and people then go to Amazon to buy the product, then it really defeats the purpose.
Hmm.
Um, Ours is a little different when it comes to retail. Our assumption is that if the customer is buying window blinds, then our products will be there for them to explore
Okay.
and learn about our product.
And let's talk a little bit more about the marketplaces as well, because you mentioned Amazon. You've talked a little bit. I think you guys are you experimented with Walmart. I don't know if you're live on Walmart. How have your experiences been with those marketplaces, and also maybe Best Buy as well? Maybe let's touch on their marketplace.
Amazon is by far dominant. Like you're gonna drive traffic to your own Shopify store, and people are still gonna go on Amazon to buy it. It's just a huge trust factor.
Hmm.
Um, they're gonna look at the Amazon reviews, which is very important. That you guys get good reviews. I think of our two SKUs, one's like 4.1, one's 4.3. So like you need a good product, you need good reviews because people look at that. Um, Best Buy, unless they're running a promo, the online doesn't really drive as much. In stores, probably during holiday season when people are looking for gifts. Um,
Hmm.
but Amazon's a beast. Like Amazon's 50-50 with Shopify for us.
Okay, that's good to know. Would love to know in the chat from the audience who's focused primarily on retail, online, or who's doing a bit of both. And now we'll kind of jump into some questions. So give me a second here, trying to pull up. I forgot a lot of questions. So
Yeah.
here's one. At what company size or revenue level would you recommend establishing a US entity? I know you said early on, but maybe if we can attach a number to it. I know that's something that people always struggle with.
Sorry, what was the question?
What company size or revenue level would you recommend starting that US entity? Or is it something you
Right
wish you
away.
had done right away, eh?
Right
Okay.
away. Yeah, build that traction because you want to if for the purpose of financing, they're gonna look at your financial statements. The
Okay.
US financial statements are separate from the Canadian one. Just got to remember that. So when you submit the US ones, you want to show revenue.
Okay. Okay, so right away, guys. So don't wait, get that US entity started.
Yeah.
Let's see, we have a question from Robert C here. How do you manage the movement of goods across borders, including the custom regulation side? I know that's something on everyone's mind right now.
We ship direct to the country that we plan to sell to. So from China, we ship directly to California.
Okay.
And if it's in Canada, then it goes to our own office in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And
when it goes to Europe, we use after we get the VAT, we use a freight forwarder, and then we enter through the Netherlands because it's the easiest to enter. And then from the Netherlands, they'll disperse it to Germany and the UK, and then the other pan EU programs.
with respect to the incoming April 2nd deadline there, are there any steps that you guys are kind of doing to clean house?
Doesn't affect us.
It doesn't affect
Yeah,
you
because the
guys. Okay.
majority of the inventory is already in the US,
Hmm.
and everything ships out of China.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
There is
Got a quick.
another program. Um, if you do want to test the European market, it's called Portless, and
Hmm.
they're a bonded warehouse in Shenzhen.
Okay.
So when you buy products from China, um, you don't get charged VAT, which I think is like 13 or 20%, something like that. But you don't get charged VAT as a foreign company because the assumption is that the good's going to leave the country. Portless is, while it still remains in China, it is a bonded warehouse, so legally speaking, they consider it as an export. The inventory stays there, and they ship it individually to your customers worldwide. And shipping times could be 5 to 10 business days, but that could be a low cost, low risk option to test new markets if you don't want to set up logistics and warehousing in that country.
Okay. And are there any programs in Canada that you make use of for this, like through the EDC or Export Canada?
No, we don't. We just honestly, like we use a customs broker that brings it in, and then we just ship it out individually. And if it's going to Best Buy, it's going to Best Buy. But nothing complicated in Canada, to be honest. I know a lot of people store in Canada and ship to the US.
Hmm.
But for us, it's kind of the opposite. Like the US is the hottest market for us. You want to
Okay.
be in the US, like whatever you're generating in Canada, if you're in Canada only, like imagine 10 times in the US.
Here's another question over here, and you may have touched on this a little bit, but we'll reiterate. So, Irina's asked, we've set up a company in the U.S., but because the company is owned by non-residents, we're having difficulties getting a credit card. Any advice on what to do there?
A credit card, use Airwallex.
Or use Airwallex. That's what I was
I
thinking.
mean, yeah, use Airwallex if it's a credit card. I mean, SVB gave me a credit card, but it's not much.
Hmm.
You could always get an Amex, to be honest. If you have an
Hmm.
Amex account in Canada, call Amex and say, hey, I want to open an Amex US company, and they'll use your Amex Canada profile. And I think I got like a 100
Okay.
grand limit on Amex US, to be honest,
Okay.
over 100 grand USD limit.
Yeah, I believe it's that. I spoke to them last week. So two good solutions there. Airwallets, of course,
Yeah.
and then sounds like
And
if you could apply for a Canadian Amex, you can get that replicated in the US side.
yeah, under the US entity's name. Yeah, you could do that.
Here's a question from Ben G. Do you operate as a subsidiary, a branch, a JV, or a franchise in foreign markets?
Subsidiary. So
Subsidiary.
the Canadian is the parent.
Yeah.
And we had an opportunity to do a flip, which means flipping our entity to a US entity as the parent, but we kept the Canadian as the parent. The US is a sub, and the UK one will be a sub as well.
Okay. And that still allows you then to take advantage of the tax credits in Canada and whatnot, I guess then.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So that makes sense. We've got another question from Joseph R here. And I think we've answered this a little bit, but well, I'll ask it anyways. What systems do you use right now to handle currency fluctuation or international payments? I think we've chatted Airwallex is potentially
Airwallex, yeah,
that
yeah. You
solved
guys
there.
want to use, if you're doing a lot of USD business, Airwallex to me is the fastest, gives you the best rate. You could transfer money from the corporations back and forth much easier, um, because you have an Airwallex account for the US entity and then for the Canadian entity, and it's instant. If you do end up using like TD in Canada and Brex in the US, it's not instant. Like you still have to send wires back and forth. So Airwallex just makes everything easier for us on the finance side.
And maybe we'll double click on something there because I think there's something interesting that you guys use Airwallex for as well. That could be interesting. So can you talk a little bit about how you guys use Airwallex or these type of tools to pay contractors and like there's some of the expense repayments and things like that?
So what we do, and this is why like I used to use Float for this, and some of the other players, and I hated it because it always bounced. We create a single credit card for each SaaS vendor or each vendor, and there's a limit on that. And the reason why we do that is because we had an experience one time in the past where one of the credit cards got compromised. So we had to change all the, you know, all the credit card information for all the apps. So instead of that, if you just create a new Airwallex virtual card and apply to one type of app, you avoid that, and you can put a limit on that. So if you're going to spend, I don't know, ChatGPT, whatever that amount is, $100, and then it can't go over that. And then if that credit card gets compromised, you just kill it and launch a new one, and you don't have to change all your other passwords. It's kind of like password management programs where they create a new password for each app and they just save it
Hmm.
for you rather than using the same password over and over. And then if that password gets compromised, you're screwed. You have to change everything. So we use that for our apps and managing our apps.
So I guess that would be one advantage to Airwallex over, say Amex, for example, I guess in that case then.
Yeah. Amex is more like I'm using the physical credit card. I'm going out and I'm
Yeah.
using it rather than a lot of expenses, unless it's tied to like Facebook where I spend a lot of money.
Okay. So sounds like Amex is for like the lifestyle, the travel,
Yeah,
some of
to
the
give you a
entertaining
card.
stuff.
Yeah, if,
Yeah.
if you're traveling a lot, then I mean the perks of an Amex is beautiful. Like the platinum cards are great. If you travel, like the lounges and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but if you're talking about company expenses and like software services and operations and stuff, then you could use Airwallex. And they give you
Interesting.
rewards. The other players
Oh,
don't, by the way.
that's good. That's like rewards are always good.
Yeah.
Here's another question here that actually is really interesting. So and this is maybe more relevant to you guys. So do your products require any tweaks based on legal requirements of a new
Yeah.
market? And oh, they
Not
do. Okay.
tweaks, but certifications and testing.
Okay.
So we're trying to enter India now.
Yeah.
And India requires a specific certification, and it's going to take us a couple of months to get it. But depending on the country you're in, you do require specific certifications. Um, if we had thought of India at the very beginning of designing the product, during the product management stage, we would have done it. But in this case, Amazon reached out to us and asked us if we wanted to launch in India. So we're like, okay, we'll launch, and then yeah.
And is that an example of an R&D kind of project that you'd have being done in Canada versus the US?
Yes and no. I mean, we're doing it in China. Like the testing lab has to do the testing and get
Yeah.
certified, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. That makes
I
sense.
mean, if
But
your
maybe,
product is made in Canada, then sure, but
mhm.
our products are made in China.
Okay. But then maybe like the legal side, the paperwork, all that kind of stuff, that you're doing in the Canada side, or do you have a team in the US that takes care of that side?
Everything is done in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think we have a US employee. No.
Okay. Interesting. Cool. Let's see here. Let's see. I have another question here from Donna P. Do you have these shell companies in the US and the UK ship everything from Canada, or are you distributing directly to these countries? I think you answered that as well.
Yeah,
So you're
I answered
shipping
that. Yeah.
direct. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you
Um,
want to test like a product, if you could get Amazon, and if you're on Amazon, Amazon has um, multi-channel fulfillment, so they could fulfill your Shopify orders as well. So you use Amazon as a warehouse, and they could
okay.
fulfill your Shopify orders. And the good thing about Amazon is that if they lose your inventory, they pay for that inventory.
Oh,
Whereas I've used warehouses in the US and you have to get insurance, and if they lose the inventory, they're not liable for it. You have to file a claim with insurance, and it's a bitch. You might take forever to get back.
interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Let's maybe talk about that. So shipping within countries. Do you go to a domestic provider or are you using, an international shipper? How does that kind of work on that end?
So shipping domestically, so in the
When
States,
you're shipping in the States, but if it's a direct to consumer order
in the States,
in the States, yeah.
yeah, we have our own 3PL,
Okay.
and if we ever want to use Amazon, we could turn on multi-channel fulfillment, and Amazon could fulfill it for us. But we use our
So
own
how
3PL. Yeah.
how do you vet a 3PL? Well, maybe I won't say
I've
virtually because
never
I
had
know.
good experiences with any of them.
Yeah,
I mean, Amazon's lost our inventory, but they pay us, so
yeah. So that
that's
takes
okay
care of
with
that.
me. Yeah, that's
So do
okay
you,
with me. But like especially during like holiday seasons, a lot of these
yeah.
3PLs in the States, they just hire a bunch of temp workers and they don't know what they're doing. And they're like, we had customers get like socks. I mean, we don't sell socks. And then some guy that bought socks got our product and he's like, hey, I got your product by mistake. So you gotta be careful of a lot of 3PLs. We like even our existing 3PL, I'm not gonna name them, they're not the best, but
Mhm.
they're the least of all the evils out there.
Okay. And do you have like a list of questions that you kind of ask a 3PL before signing on, or do you physically go down there and visit them, or how do you do that?
Um, Manufacturers we do, 3PLs I believe we do as well. Our ops team would fly down there and meet them. Um,
Okay.
we would look at their like service levels. We always get referrals. Referrals is typically how we operate.
Okay. So once again, it sounds like getting your boots on the ground, rolling up your sleeves, and getting your hands dirty is a requirement when you're expanding internationally. It's not something like, 10 years ago, people were drop shipping. They turn on a new region. It's not
Yeah.
quite simple as that anymore. Okay.
No, no, they're getting a lot more strict.
Let's talk maybe a little bit about the Delaware Corp again. So we've got a question here from DJ. How are you structuring your business activities and transfer pricing between your Canadian parent company and your US Corp? Are you paying corporate taxes mostly in Canada or mostly in the US?
We don't pay corporate tax because we're still like burning.
Hmm.
But you would how we structure it is the US entity is the sales arm. So any and all sales activity, ad spend, revenue, all of that is the US, and then the Canadian is all R&D, product development, and it's a huge chunk still because that's all the labor costs. So
Okay.
all the Facebook ad spend, marketing US, all the R&D Canadian. That's how we structure it at least.
Okay. And again, that allows you to tap into those tax credits for R&D in Canada. And then
Correct.
as we know, commercialization in the US is king. So
Yeah.
that works well. Okay, interesting. And I think someone asked here, Regina H was asking, you mentioned a service that you use to set up a US entity. Can you repeat which one that was?
It's Stripes. So everyone knows Stripe, stripe.com.
Hmm.
Type in Stripe Atlas into Google,
Stripe
you'll see it.
Atlas.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Stripe Atlas, guys, for those asking.
Yeah, it takes like 10 minutes to set up. It's easy as hell.
And I think we've maybe answered this, but I'll ask it again here. How do you manage your Shopify to be paid in the US? So we've got Sylvia E here who sells in the US and Canada, but Shopify does the conversions automatically. They're currently an Airwallex user for their US supplier. So how can she structure that to get that payout?
You have to open it under the US corporation,
Okay.
US Shopify account. And then it stays in US dollars, and we don't like most of our revenues in USD, so we keep in USD. Um, we keep it in USD, and then we use Airwallex to convert it to Canadian dollars at the right time, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So store in USD, payout in Canadian.
Yeah, I'm assuming she has a Canadian Shopify account. That's why it's converting to
Must be.
Canadian dollars. But if you have a US one, then the currency will be USD.
Okay.
So open the Delaware C Corp, start like funneling it through it. Now, like obviously, there's gonna be some cost when it comes to accounting because they have to create two set of books and then consolidate it. But it's not onerous, and you get more benefit as a U.S. corporation.
Okay.
Yeah,
And is this a situation again where having a partner kind of US agency to help you navigate that is beneficial,
I
or can you do that
I
all
I
on your own?
I do know there's a lot of companies out there that essentially can represent you in the U.S. as a they have like a social security number, and um, a lot of media companies do it as well, like digital media companies.
Mhm.
But we just have friends and family that do it for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let me talk a little bit here we got some questions about retail now. So what are the typical distributor and retail margins for retail partnerships? And do they differ by geographic region? Are they different in Canada, the US, Europe?
Um, you'll get, I mean, it really depends. It depends on the product as well. It's like some products are 50% margin, some are 20% margin, to be honest. And you could always negotiate. Um, I think the US is a little bit more expensive from my experience, like what margins they require, maybe by 5 points, but they're a bigger market, and you can always negotiate them down after. The way I think about retail is if if your ROAS is 3x, then you're already spending 33%, 30% on ad spend to acquire the customer. It's the same margin that you're going to give the retailers, and they're going to be responsible for acquiring the customer for you.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
actually
so
good
it's
insight.
kind of like the same in my opinion.
Hmm. We have another question here about R&D. I think this concept of having R&D in Canada is honestly, it's great. And as someone who works in hard tech, like I
Yeah,
have to applaud you there. Like I love
yeah,
it.
you need
Uh,
it. There's a good talent here. There's I why are you going to go to the valley? You're going to meet some ex Apple engineer that raises $400 million and goes bankrupt. Like, what's the point of that?
exactly right. And it
Built
goes with
another
that
humane pin.
that whole theme of Build Canada right now, which everyone's talking about, right? Shout out to the team behind that. I think that embodies that perfectly. Like
There's
Canada
a
is a
lot
great
of
place to build.
there's a lot of hiring grants too. Like IRAP will give you funds. Eco.ca, great
Hmm.
organization for if you're in clean tech or digital
Hmm.
media. They give you a lot of money. I think like 20, 30,000 per employee. Um, I think every single one of our employees, except for maybe one or two, was hired under a grant,
Wow.
and that's like
Okay.
20K free money. So
Yeah.
take advantage of the Canadian grants.
And when you're a startup, that's important, right? It allows you to vet those different candidates and then pick the key ones that you want to invest in. So I think that's
Yeah,
it's the team that's going to make the difference. So you
yeah.
can build that team. Interesting. So with the R&D arm in Canada, how many full-time employees do you need? And let's see here. Sorry. With the R&D arm in Canada, how many full-time employees do you have?
Full-time employees is, I think, 20 something, 27, 28. We have a bunch of international contractors. Like we have one in China that oversees our procurement and production. We have a few engineers in India, South Africa, um, Europe for some consultants and full-time contractors. But overall, I think our team size is around 20, 29.
And that's interesting. So I think that actually touches on something I was going to ask you about. How do you decide who to hire internationally, right? Because you don't necessarily, like you were talking about, you use referrals as a good kind of guide, but if you're not in that country, you may not have referrals. What's your strategy there for hiring people?
So funny, China was actually a referral because we know other hardware companies that manufacture in China. So they referred us to our production manager in China. Internationally, you might go through agencies, you might go through um, like development shops. But the reason why is because they're good and they're a lot more affordable.
Okay, that's a great answer. And I've got one other fintech question over here. And I think this is actually of interest to people because I know there's some changes here recently. How has your experience been when you compare Wise to Airwallex? Have you tried Wise?
I did try Wise. So I liked Wise. I don't know if this is permanent, but they got rid of their transaction fees. But back then when I used it, they used to charge like 5, 10 cents per transaction or something like that. Um, their batch payments aren't as seamless as Airwallex. So I do a lot of batch payments.
Hmm.
Um, and I believe the currency conversion was better with Airwallex. Their UX isn't as nice as Airwallex, and it doesn't make sense. It kind of just looks like a conversion and credit card kind of feel rather than like a bank. So
Okay.
if you're comparing both, then by far you need to use Airwallex. I've used Wise. Yeah,
Okay.
I still have a Wise account by the way, but I use Airwallex.
Okay. And we'll, for those of you interested in Airwallex, the Airwallex team will reach out with a potential offer for you to give their services a try. Um, Trung, that was super insightful. I really want to thank you for taking the time this afternoon to share with us some of these, again, real numbers, real stories, real experiences. I think you've really highlighted that, in Canada, we build companies differently. We build products that are different. And Canada might not be for sale, but we've definitely got some great made in Canada products that are.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really key piece of the narrative here that people have to understand is, while the numbers, in the US might be changing right now, you can still do that development, that R&D in Canada, take advantage of a lot of the great programs that we have here and leverage that to, distribute your product across the world. And I think what you guys have built at Rise is a perfect example of that.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, Trung. And for everyone else who's on, before you jump off, just wanted to let you know that if you're interested in further e-commerce North programming, you can check out our newly launched website that has our new brand and our schedule for the year. There's also an ability to check out our podcast, our mailing list, and our summit, which we haven't announced yet formally, but the tickets will be released on April 15th. We have a 2-day summit this year coming up in late September, this coming fall, late September, the 22nd and 23rd, I believe, or somewhere around there. And those tickets will drop on the 15th. And again, just a reminder that the tickets are free for brands for a limited period of time, 2 weeks. And then after that, there'll be a fee attached to them. So keep an eye out for that. Sign up to our mailing list so you don't miss it. And we'll see you at the next webinar in I believe it's in May. So thanks a lot, everyone, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, guys.